Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Two Footed Tackle podcast. I'm your host, Ari Stamatakos. We're here again, episode 9, I think, of season 3. I should really know that, but no well. We're here again. Hope everyone's well. I hope the weekend has treated everyone nicely. For those who were keen and eagle-eyed viewers or listeners last week will know that I was up in Brisbane. I was going to go up to Brisbane for the weekend to watch the Carl Football Club play in the AFL. So for those in Australia, you probably know. For those overseas, you don't. It's basically it's our sport in Australia. In what is the football equivalent of the semi-final in a playoff structure or Champions League structure, and we lost unfortunately. So went up to Brisbane, watched the boys play, watched the boys run around. We lost unfortunately, but it was one of those losses where, yeah, it's disappointing, but you're also really proud of the effort. You're proud of etc. etc. So whilst leaving Brisbane disappointed, not leaving Brisbane with anger. Quite tired. We arrived back on Monday morning. It's currently Monday 3:10 at the time of recording. We arrived at 9 a.m. this morning. 10 a.m. this morning, even had to get up at 5 o'clock for the flight. I'm a bit tired, a bit drowsy, a bit lethargic, a bit drained emotionally, and physically and kind of mentally drained. But we power through. I don't really have a run sheet for this episode, but there's a lot to speak about, including the top that I'm wearing right now, the club that's the badge is on here, North London Derby, Newcastle won 8-0, a bunch of other things to speak about. So we aren't short of talking points. This might be a shorter podcast than usual because I'm really just cooked at the moment, in all honesty. But we'll be back, and we'll be back next week full fresh. I say that every week, and there always seems to just be something going wrong. But we'll be back next week fresh. We'll be and we'll power through today as best as possible. But enough about me. Hope everyone else is well. Hope everyone's weekend is treated nicely as always. I hope your sporting clubs have won. And I hope the ever tumultuous and unpredictable world has treated everyone kindly over the past 7 days. As always, before we start things off, make sure you subscribe to the Two Footed Tackle podcast on YouTube. Make sure you like the podcast, notification bell, so you don't miss any clips, etc., etc. All the socials, Two Footed Tackle podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok for any clips, updates, thoughts, feelings, emotions, etc. And of course on the audio platforms as well: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Anchor. Just even if you do watch on YouTube, head on over to those audio platforms and give it a subscribe, a follow, 5-star rating, share, thumbs up, or whatever it is. It would mean more than the world. And of course, there is a Linktree link in the bio of both Twitter and Instagram for all your Two-Footed Tackle podcasting needs. I don't know why I started speaking like that, but I digress. I digress a lot in this podcast. We're here. A lot to speak about. One big result, Newcastle win 8-0, so we'll touch on that. Touch on North London Derby, of course. I'm going to touch on Chelsea. I'm going to touch on some other talking points that I've got listed down. So there's quite a few, which we'll get through all of them. Who knows? Let's see how long this podcast is going to go for. Let's kick things off. Where should we start? Could start with the North London Derby. I want to start with Chelsea. Purely because I want to get it out of the way. Where do we start with the Chelsea Football Club? Last week I was very critical of Manchester United in some ways, and I was also quite understanding of Manchester United in other ways. But I went relatively in depth into the Manchester United Football Club last week, and there's obviously a clip of that on the YouTube channel if you missed it. And I mentioned at the back end of that podcast that I wasn't going to speak on Chelsea because of the whole mental health and not driving myself insane. But after a 1-0 loss to Aston Villa at home, I feel like it's hard to ignore the gigantic fuck-off elephant sitting in the corner of the room, and that is my football club being just great in every facet. So, yeah, I don't even know where to start from here. But, of course, Chelsea played their 6th Premier League game of the season. They lost 1-0 to Aston Villa. Ollie Watkins on about the 70th minute with the goal. I'm not really here to speak about the performance and criticise the performance because that's been done ad nauseum across so many social platforms and across so many forums and TV and radio and Twitter and Facebook and Reddit and whatever. So I'm not I'm not going to sit here and criticize the performance because that's been done aplenty, and also because that's been done aplenty, and also I really could be here all day. To be honest, I could be here all day criticizing the performance. If we want to delve into it from a tactical perspective, but I'm not going to do that. We'll speak about the season as a whole so far for Chelsea. So last night, I say last night, it was last night for Australian time at the time of recording this. Chelsea lost 1-0 to Villa, and this kind of culminates in a way to Chelsea winning one game from the opening 6 Premier League fixtures, including a 1-0 loss at home to Forest, a 0-0 draw away at Bournemouth, a 3-1 loss away at Aston Villa, a 1-0 draw at home to Liverpool, and of course the loss against the 3-1 loss away to West Ham, I should say. I don't know, I think I might have said Villa. And of course the loss against Villa. The only win so far this season for Chelsea in competitive in the league, should I say, was against Luton Town at home, and of course Chelsea beat Wimbledon at home in the AFL Cup, in which they scraped through due to a penalty. Due to a penalty on the stroke of half-time from Modieke, and Enzo Fernandez had to scrape Chelsea out of jail just after the hour mark, whilst also Chelsea going 1-0 down in that game. Looking at the lineups, yeah, a lot of rotation, but still a lineup that should beat Wimbledon quite comfortably. I digress. If we go back previously, before this season, Chelsea's run has been dreadful. We obviously all know the stupidness that was last season. Chelsea going through 3 managers, one of many Premier League clubs, or a few Premier League clubs, I should say, going through 3 managers. Started the season, average with Tuchel, had a little bit of a spike at the start of the Graham Potter era. That went to shit quite quickly, and then Frank Lampard came in and I think won 1 of his 10 or 11 competitive games that he played, something like that. Let me bring up the actual run, because it's something like Chelsea have won 2 games in their last 16 Premier League games, or something absurd like that. So if we go from the new year, Chelsea have won. If we go from the new year, Chelsea have won 1. So let's go through Chelsea's wins from the new year in order. They beat Palace 1-0 on the 1st of January. They beat Leeds 1-0 on the 5th of March. They beat Leicester 3-1 on the 12th of March, and then their next win came against Bournemouth on the 7th of May, I should say. So it was the 12th of March, then the 7th of May, a 3-1 win against Bournemouth, and then it was of course the Luton win. So it's been 4 Premier League wins in the calendar year for Chelsea. 4 Premier League wins in the entirety of the calendar year. 5 Premier League wins, I should say. That is, regardless of the Chelsea Football Club, for a club that is in the Premier League, that is unacceptable, naturally. Even for a club in the Championship, that's unacceptable. 5 league wins when you're in September for the calendar year is unacceptable. Chelsea have not scored a goal in 3 games. 2 1-0 losses and a 0-0 draw. Even still, the last Chelsea scored 3 goals against Luton Town, who were going to challenge Derby for having the most amount of points, or the least amount of points in a season, right? So it's looking very bleak, to say the absolute least. Looking very bleak, and I feel like that context of the run is very important when actually dissecting Chelsea. Now, you got to look at what's changed. I think that's kind of where you got to look at. What is the Chelsea Football Club right now? The Chelsea Football Club are a club in turmoil, both on the pitch, off the pitch, financially a mess, because despite the stupid amounts of money Todd Bohley has, and despite the stupid amounts of money that he's thrown at the football club, the fact that Chelsea still don't have a shirt sponsor halfway through September, or towards the end of September, start of October, is a little bit concerning. The vibe around the ground, if you want to talk about pure intangibles, the vibe and the culture around the ground is toxic, to say the absolute least. The players got booed off the ground, rightly so, I think, in the game against Villa, which obviously isn't good regardless. I mean, the fans want to set standards. I get that, but also you don't want your own fans booing your own players. I get that it's probably just, but you still don't want to see that. I think Chelsea fans are going to be the first to admit that they don't want to boo their own players. But this is the situation that the players have put themselves in. You have about close to $1 billion worth of transfers over the last 12 months, if you want to be generous, and you have a manager who were brought in not to the mass contempt, but to a vast amount of contempt that meant his job was under an immediate pressure that probably wouldn't have been seen if someone like Julian Nagelsmann was brought in, or someone like an Ange Postecoglou, or a manager of a different type of ilk, obviously with Pochettino's Tottenham connection, with his public hatred for Chelsea while he was Tottenham boss, rightly so. There's a lot of pressure put on him straight away, as well as also the turmoil surrounding the squad turnover. You look at the starting 11 from the last Premier League game of last season to the first Premier League game of this season. It's almost completely different. I mean, if we look at the side that played against Villa, if we look at the side that started against Villa, how many of them were here last season? You look at Sanchez, so you have Sanchez, Gusto, Disasi, Colwill, Caicedo, and Jackson. So that's half your starting 11. Half your starting 11 being completely new. Then you've got the likes of Mudryk, who signed in January. So there's a 1 January signing, so that's 7 who've been here for half a year. Enzo signed in January, so that's 8 who've been there half a year. I don't know if I counted Caicedo, but basically the only ones that were here last year were Thiago Silva, Conor Gallagher, and Raheem Sterling. So 8. 8 Premier League players started, were part of the squad at the start of last season. So once again, I think that says a lot about what is happening at Chelsea and what kind of plagues this football club. Despite the transfer in ownership, despite the transfer in a lot of things, coach or manager, backroom staff, at the board level, there seems to be this still overlying kind of rot that sits at Chelsea. Whether that's tangible, and by tangible I mean whether or not that's because of a person, I don't know. Whether that's just this ingrained culture of the football club, which is obviously much harder to fix, I don't know. But what we do know is that Chelsea were in a position with 10 games to go last year where it was still mathematically possible for Chelsea to get relegated. That's unacceptable under any circumstance. Yes, there were extenuating circumstances last year that you could sit back and think, okay, let's just write this season off. It's a blip of a season, similarly to how Jose's last season was at the club, or last half season was at the club, I should say. It's just a blip in the radar, and then we're going to return next year and be better. A lot of things lent and kind of hinted at that resurgence happening. The mass amount of transfers, a lot of the young and exciting prospects that were coming through, players returning from injury, new coach, etc., etc. A lot of the older guard leaving, Kovacic leaving, Jorginho leaving, Kante, Koulibaly, Azpilicueta, Havertz, etc., etc. This older guard that was a part of that Tuchel, Potter, Lampard era, slowly starting to leave. Okay. Both Lampard at the start, before Tuchel, and after Tuchel, of course. So yeah, a lot of things hinted at the possible resurgence for Chelsea. However, like I said, 6 games into the Premier League season, so many tactical errors, so many wrong decisions being made, which has left Chelsea with, 3 draws, a win, and 2 losses. No, three losses. Yeah, 3 losses, 2 draws, and a win from 6 Premier League games. You look at the draws, you draw to Liverpool at home, considering how well they've started the season. Okay, not the worst result in the world. And the draw to Bournemouth away, which you'll expect Chelsea to win more often than not, so that's disappointing. Look at the losses. West Ham away from home, disappointing. Forest, almost inexcusable. And Villa, despite how well they've played towards the back end of last season, despite how well they've started this season, and despite how well drilled they are, etc., still not good enough. So, what happens here? Where do we go, etc., etc. I think when you're looking at it from a tactical perspective, a lot of question marks. I think for me, the big glaring issue is the use of Enzo Fernandez, or I should say the misuse of Enzo Fernandez. For whatever reason, Mauricio Pochettino sees Enzo Fernandez and played Enzo Fernandez in the game against Aston Villa as a aggressive number 8, kind of similarly to how, I wouldn't say similarly to how Frank Lampard played, but in that kind of mould of borderline a shadow striker, pushing in, crashing the box, being on that 18-yard line, 20 yards out, floating in that area, when really he's one of the best progressive passers in the league, has shown it last year, showed it towards the start of this year, playing in that slightly deeper role. He has the ability to really dictate tempo and also drive Chelsea forward. The whatever he has against Mahalo Mudryk, I don't know, because he was the only one that was doing anything in that game against Aston Villa, and obviously the Gusto red card, which is one of those things where it is what it is. That obviously happens, and then not long after, Mikhailo Mudryk was the one sacrificed for Ben Chilwell. Ben Chilwell comes on, and then Chelsea reshape and restructure. So for whatever reason, despite Mudryk being the only attacking talent that Chelsea had that was being good that game, he gets taken off. Okay, Cole Palmer comes on with 20 minutes to go, and once again proves to be one of Chelsea's very few shining lights, especially in a progressive sense, playing in that number 10 role, being good. Like Cole Palmer was good when he came on, and he's good in the cameo appearances that he has had so far. And then there's those two wrong decisions. Playing Levi Colwill at left back, I just don't know. Like I just don't know. Is it a situation where he wants Colwill to play as a left back, to come inside, to drop in as that third centre half to allow Gusto to push forward? Obviously, Gusto is a far more aggressive player, similar to how Reece James plays in that more aggressive mould. Maybe, is that Levi Colwell's best position? No. Should Levi Colwill be playing as Chelsea's starting centre half? He's probably proved to be capable enough to do that. You look at Thiago Silva, was he at fault for the goal? Probably. Is he past his best? Definitely. Is he in Chelsea's best 11? Probably not. Chelsea obviously have, and then I'll get onto injury issues later, but so there's that. You have Raheem Sterling, who looks a shadow of his former self to what he was in Manchester City. You have Nicholas Jackson, who showed a lot of promise in pre-season and earlier on in the year, but is probably suffering from the state in which the club is in. His confidence is low. He can't seem to get going. He for a player that looked so clinical and so proficient in pre-season, he's come into the start of the season, especially in the last couple of weeks, and has looked panicky, has looked kind of really uncontrolled, like doesn't have control of his body, doesn't have control of his limbs, and he looks very lanky and very Bambi on ice sort of way. Armando Broja was brought into the fold after, obviously this is his first game back. Yeah, his first game back from his knee injury that he suffered against Newcastle, which was very unfortunate. But yeah, so obviously he's returned back from injury. Whether or not he starts ahead of Jackson, I don't know. Broja's probably far more of a connective striker, good hold up play, but can still get in behind. And then yeah, you've got a bench that is filled with youth players apart from that, right? And that of course speaks to the injury issue that I have. So they're all the tactical issues, and I spent a couple of minutes speaking about purely, not even tactical, selection and team selection issues. Because speaking about the tactics and how really just shit the tactics are, completely separate point that I'll probably speak about further down the line if Chelsea continue to struggle. But you look at the injury issues, and this is something that does not help. Reece James out, Trevor Chalobah out, Christopher Nkunku out, Fofana out, Chukwuemeka out, Lavia out, Badiashile out, Moreake and Caicedo both didn't feature in the squad. When you look at that, when you look at starting 11 at their best, Reece James, Nkunku, we'll go with one of Fofana and or Badiashile because I think Colwill starts, so you can't play both of them because you're not playing Levi Colwill left back. So we'll go 3. Chukwuemeka probably not. Lavia probably does start, maybe. If not, he's probably the 12th best player. Caicedo definitely starts, and Moreake, you probably start him out of Sterling at this rate. So that's 6 players. 6 players, give or take, from the starting 11 that are out injured. Sorry, Moses Caicedo did play. He's been listed as injured here. I don't know why. I was concerned. I was a bit confused as to why he was listed as injured. It's because I think he got injured in the game and had strapping on his knee post game, so that's why he's been listed as injured. But that's obviously a player that will be injured and will probably miss a couple of weeks. So yeah, 6 players will be out of the first team squad, some long term, like in Nkunku, some short term, like someone like a Madueke who should be fit relatively soon. Regardless, the point stands, the injury crisis is fucked and does not help Mauricio Pochettino in the slightest. So you have all those combining factors of turmoil off the pitch, fans angry, etc. Mauricio Pochettino getting a lot of things wrong, tactically, team selection wise, etc., etc. A stupidly long injury list, which not only builds pressure on the starting 11 to perform, puts pressure on the manager, but also takes away the manager's best abilities. So when injuries pile up, the results will naturally get worse, which puts a lot more pressure on Pochettino to get more out of a far more depleted squad than if he had all of his players back, which meant the pressure wouldn't be on him as much to get the same results out of a better squad, because those results will come naturally because of just the individual talent, right? If that makes sense, if that whole thing made sense. The injury issues have put a lot of pressure on Poch, essentially, is what I'm saying. You look at the run that Chelsea have had, it's probably statistically the best run that any team has had in the first 6 games of the season. You look at, they've had 2 hard games. Chelsea have had probably 2 hard games, maybe 3 if you want to count West Ham. So you look at Villa at home, Villa at home, probably a 50, not want to say 50-50, but Villa started the season quite well. So it's not easy, but Bournemouth easy, Forest easy, Luton easy. And then you have West Ham away, which should be relatively comfortable. Probably add that with Villa at home, and then Liverpool at home is probably the only really tough game that they've had so far. So there's so many combining factors, some mitigating in terms of when you wanted to speak about Poch, should you sack Poch, that whole mitigating factors. Some are aggravating factors to why you should sack him, team selection, tactics. Others mitigating factors such as injuries and other external influences, obviously not good. I think the Chelsea board need to be patient. I think that's probably the best way to describe it. What they need to do in their process going forward. They need to just be like, okay, Chelsea can't make a rash decision. Whatever that decision is, it cannot be rash. It can't be flip of a coin. Do it, because you need to have a plan. I think Chelsea, it showed last season that Chelsea make a rash decision in sacking Thomas Tuchel 12 months down the drain. Literally 12 months down the drain, right? So and I know I'm a big proponent of football always happens next year. There is no way on planet Earth that Chelsea get relegated. I would actually go as far as say it's almost physically impossible for Chelsea to get relegated, because the team is just too talented. Like, it is physically too talented to get relegated. Like, Enzo Fernandez will win games off his own, like by himself, right? Stuff like that. So Chelsea won't get relegated. They'll continue to be in the Premier League. They are a club that has established themselves to a point where they don't need Champions League football to attract players. They have the funds to attract players. So the future prospects of the club won't be in danger, aren't dependent on the previous season results because of the factors I just mentioned. However, you cannot continue to waste years. There is only a limited amount of years that you can waste before it gets to the point where it can completely derail a club's future. And we'll touch on another club that has had their future derailed or is currently in their derailment process. And a couple of years ago, if you told that this club supporters fan base that they'd be derailed, they would have laughed in your face. So stay tuned for that. So it does happen. It can happen quickly. Just look at Arsenal, look at United, and look at how far they've had to come to get back to any resemblance of success. Obviously, Arsenal has taken them 20 plus years, or maybe not 20 plus years, but around about 20 years to finally get back to where they were in the early 2000s, late 90s. United, similar, it's been 10 years, and now they're finally, maybe not now, but now there is at least a project that has a future under Ten Hag. I spoke about it last week. So it's taken them a decade, right? So Chelsea can't fall into this trap of, I mean, even when you look at Liverpool, right? How long were they in the wilderness for, right? Especially in the league until they finally won one. So you can't continue to waste years because it will eventually take a toll on the club, and the club will be permanently set back. There are temporary setbacks and then there are permanent setbacks. I think what happened to Chelsea last year was only a temporary setback. But if that happens again this year, that probably becomes a permanent setback. And if that happens again the year after, it's another permanent setback. And that will eventually create a big gap between Chelsea and the top clubs for Chelsea to claw their way back. And all of a sudden, you're 3, 4, 5, 6 years behind the likes of City, Arsenal, Liverpool, potentially even Spurs, right? So you can't let temporary issues become permanent. And last year's temporary issue should have been resolved this year. And the fact that it hasn't probably speaks a lot about the culture of the club. And I'm speaking, this is coming from a Chelsea fan, right? This is coming from a Chelsea fan. You said the top I've got on, you said these posters in the background. It's coming from a Chelsea fan, right? The culture at the club is toxic. There is a aura of superiority about Chelsea, rightly or wrongly so. Chelsea go into every game expecting to win. They think they're the best, which is good because in order to be the best, you have to be cocky in some regards. However, I think that's crossed the line where there is a certain level of entitlement for Chelsea, where they think that we're a Chelsea Football Club, we can do whatever we want and we're going to win. You look at the likes of, Chelsea fans are going to hate this, but you look at Spurs and you see how they've had to humble themselves in order to kind of rebound and refresh as a club. And look at their start to the season, right? Under Ange, under a brand new team, they sold their best ever player, right? If not their best ever player, the top 3 the club's ever had, especially in modern times. They sold Harry Kane, and now look at where they are. They humbled themselves to really get back to where they want to be, or get to where they want to be, I should say. Do Chelsea know how to do that? Probably. I would think that they do. What does that humbling look like? I don't know. Because Chelsea probably don't have a player like Harry Kane on their list currently, in their squad currently. The closest thing Chelsea have had to a player like Harry Kane when it comes to the stature and the prestige that they are held at the club was Eden Hazard. And obviously he left. So that's probably the last thing that Chelsea had when it comes to humbling themselves. And even still, they did that off the back of winning a European Cup. So that was only, 2018? 2019, I think. Yeah, 19, was it? Yeah, it was 19. So, only 4 years ago. So, it's going to be very interesting. Now, I think the overall discussion point is what change needs to be made, because change obviously needs to be made, so it's about what change. Is it Poch? Is it Bohley? Is it playing staff? Whatever. I think it would be absolutely fucking ludicrous to sack Mauricio Pochettino right now. Like, have Chelsea fans not learnt what happened last year? In 2 separate occasions, it's happened to Chelsea twice in under 12 months, where they've sacked a manager prematurely, and yet they want to sack Poch. Some fans want to sack Poch after 6 games, with a stupidly long injury list, and a lot of those injured players are starting 11 players. So let's just settle in that regard. Does Todd Bohley need to go? Probably not. I would say Todd Bohley needs to have people around him to make smart decisions. Todd Bohley should not be in a position where he's the one making decisions. Todd Bohley should be the one that facilitates decisions, not making them. So I wouldn't say Todd Bohley needs to go. I would say either the people around him needs to go, or he needs to bring better people around him. That's the solution. Do the players need to go? I think the playing squad, as things stand, is more than capable of finishing at least top 6. Top 4 probably is the limit, but that is with an extremely young squad. I mean, when you look at the squad that started against Villa, how many of those players have really bright futures and are still so young, right? So you have Colwill, Disasi still 20? I mean, Disasi's 25, but still as a centre half, he's probably got 10 years left, so he still has room to grow. Gusto's still young. He's only early 20s. Yeah, he's 20. Caicedo's still young. Gallagher is probably reaching that area of his game where he needs to start to kick on. He's 23. Mudrik's still young. Jackson's still young. Enzo Fernandez is still young. Cole Palmer's still young. Armando Broja is still relatively young. He's 22. Ben Chilwell, Ben Chilwell's 26, he'll be 27 at the end of the year. He's entering that period now where he's going to become a far more senior player, and the expectation is going to be put on him to lead, similarly to how Chelsea have had the likes of, I mean, if you want to go in that exact position, I'm not going to say he has to be like Ashley Cole, But there is a clear blueprint to model yourself on when it comes to a leadership aspect, and how to conduct yourself, etc., etc. So yeah, the squad is fine. The coach, as things stand, is fine. The board probably needs a little bit of a reshuffle. But what Chelsea need right now more than anything is patience, because we've seen it takes time when you bring in a lot of players, when your squad turnover is massive, and when there is a lot of upheaval around the club. You need to stay united as a football club. You need to stay patient, and you all need to get under one common goal. And I feel like it's a very disjointed and disconnected football club at the moment, which obviously lends itself to having which has a lot of ramifications on the field. When you're a disconnected club off the field, the ramifications eventually seep down to on the field. And we've seen 1 win from 6 Premier League games start the season, 5 Premier League wins in the calendar year, and we're at the start of October. I think it says volumes about the behind the scenes things and what's happening at the club. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on Chelsea. I'm sure we'll be here speaking about it very, very soon. I'm sure we'll be here speaking about it more very soon. But yeah, that's my 2 cents on what's happening at Chelsea. Yeah, I rambled. It's half an hour and that's gone like that. So I guess time to speak on the North London derby. I think that's going to be the next talking point. So let's speak on what the hell happened at the Emirates. So yeah, what happened at the Emirates? It was Tottenham 2, Arsenal 2 in the North London derby, the first North London derby of the season. Ange Postecoglou's first North London derby, and I think the discourse before the game is something that I want highlighted a lot, right? A lot of people pre-game, something that really gave me the shits. And yes, I'm gonna be fucking speaking about Ange again, shock horror. But the talk pre-game from a lot of Arsenal fans and from a lot of pundits who rate Arsenal very highly was the whole Ange can't play this way at the Emirates. He'll get carved open. He can't press Arsenal the way that he's pressed other teams, because Arsenal with the way that they move the ball will just carve them open, right? And then it's going to be 3-0, 4-0. It's going to be a massacre. Guess what happened? Ange Postecoglou turned up at the Emirates and played the exact same way, because the man knows no different and he will not waver from his way. His way has got him to where he is. If you think he's going to change because of fucking Arsenal of all teams, with all due respect, you don't know ball. Like, with all due respect, you don't know ball. Did it work? I wouldn't say it didn't work. I also wouldn't say it worked either, because the game was very sloppy. The game was scrappy. Both teams were very poor in possession. But if you had offered Tottenham fans a 2-2 draw away at the Emirates before the game, I think a lot of fans would have taken that. So for Ange's first North London derby, for him to do that with that squad, I think that's a more than reasonable performance. I think he definitely ticked that box and passed that quite comfortably. That's fucking disgraceful. When they go to White Hart Lane, I would expect Tottenham to be far more aggressive, even in comparison to what they were at the Emirates, and really get a stranglehold over Arsenal, because there was times in that game where, despite the scrappy nature of it, Tottenham just were that half a metre quicker, half a metre sharper to the next ball, were constantly winning those 50-50s, and they always have that outlet ball. Something that's a staple of Ange's system, something that's a staple of Roberto De Zerbi's system, is they always have that outlet ball. Whenever someone's in possession, there's always one free man. Whether that's backwards, sideways, forwards, whether that's the goalkeeper, whether that's a switch across the play, there is always a player free, and that player is always accessible for that pass to be made when you're looking at the play from the player who has the ball. So that comes from hard work, comes from discipline, it comes from structure. So I think when teams tire late on in games, I mean, we saw that probably despite Arsenal having I wouldn't say ascendancy towards the latter stages of the game, Tottenham was strong defensively and still were able to really dominate on the counter-attack. He made a bold decision taking off Son, which I think I wouldn't say it didn't work, but it was definitely a like, oh yeah, this is what Ange is going to do type thing. So yeah, I think he passed the first North London derby. I think it was a fine result, 2-2. They would have loved the win. Coming back from a goal down twice, you can look at it and say, great character, superb stuff. You can also look at it and say, why are you going a goal down twice? The penalty, was it a penalty? Look, if that's now a handball, whatever. Whatever. I'm not gonna sit here and scream and cry from the rooftops because there have been worse decisions made so far this season. But it's just another decision that it's like, okay, we're slowly going into this really annoying sport. Like, it's transitioning from being the pure sport of football to something completely different. Something that robots are going to play, and something that allows for no nuance, no circumstance, nothing. So, I mean, I guess it is what it is. Who really cares? Maddison and Saka doing their whole, or Saka doing the, thinks he's not Mark Bright. He used to play football. What's his name? Gary Price. Gary Price. That name rings a really big bell. Gary Price. Gary Price? Please be Gary Price. Yeah. No, it is. No, it's not. No, it's not. What's the guy's name? Anyways, can't remember. I cannot remember the guy's name. The darts player. Going on a tangent. Anyway, Maddison or Saka doing Maddison's little pew dart celebration, and then Maddison skinning Saka for the first goal. He's quite funny. And then Maddison's comments post game was good. I think a lot of traditional supporters would probably be annoyed at that. North London derby. Why you fucking playing games with the opposition? I think it's really cool. I think it just adds a storyline. You all know the next North London derby. If Maddison scores, he'll probably do a celebration, poking fun at Saka. So yeah, it just adds that flavour to a very flavourful game, regardless of it. But yeah, I thought it was quite funny, and it just had to be Maddison skinning Saka for Tottenham's equaliser, which was very, very funny. Atmosphere at the Emirates, electric, very good from the TV. Obviously, I wasn't there, so yeah, very good from the TV. Good atmosphere. North London derbies are probably my favourite derbies in the Premier League. Is it? Yeah. I think it's the one that delivers the most. I think North London derbies delivers the most. Manchester derbies delivered at times recently. What other games are like? I feel like Chelsea Liverpool. I know it's not a derby, but like my brother's a Liverpool supporter, so I watch those games quite closely, or they're memorable games. Chelsea Liverpool are either boring as fuck, 1-1s, 0-0s, or they're really exciting games. We played Chelsea and Liverpool played a 2-2 draw at the Bridge at the start of last year, so the start of 2022, I think it was. What a fucking game. Liverpool went 2-0 up, Chelsea back 2-2. The Bridge was rocking. Yeah, it was a really good game. But yeah, I mean, by the by, no. I think it's a good conversation. What's the best rivalry? I think that's a good kind of thing to kind of speak on. What is the best rivalry / derby in the Premier League? Obviously, the North London derby on the weekend was electric, and like I said, the North London derbies more often than not deliver. I mean, there was that 4-2 game at the Emirates a couple of seasons ago where Lucas Tonali scored and like the Emirates went off. That was a really good game, if I can recall. I think the Manchester derbies had some great games. Merseyside derby can be hit and miss. Sometimes it's unreal, like when Mane scored that winner at Goodison Park and that the flares were going off. That was insane. And then you have United Liverpool, which is not a derby, probably more of a rivalry. But that game's had some incredible moments. I think didn't Liverpool win 4-2 at Old Trafford or 4-3 or something like that, like a long time ago. So yeah, it's a good question, and the Prem has a lot. Despite the Premier League derbies and rivalries not having the theatrics of like Lazio versus Roma or derbies in Europe, they always deliver more often than not, and they make for enthralling viewing, like the North London derby was on the weekend, which is always good for the neutral and always good for the neutral supporter and always good for everyone watching at home. So there you go. That's just a good talking point. Leave your thoughts in the comments below about what you guys think about that. So there's the North London derby. That's done. Spoke about that. Spoke about Chelsea. Let's speak on Newcastle winning 8-0. Is that like I know Newcastle were great. Newcastle are really good, right? They won 8-0 away from home, 8 separate goal scorers. I don't think that's ever happened before in Premier League history. Yeah, I don't think that's ever happened before in Premier League history. Congratulations. It was a masterful performance, right? Masterful performance. However, at what stage do we need to look at these newly promoted teams and be like, what the fuck is the point? Because Burnley, Sheffield United, and Luton have all not won a game so far this season, right? A lot of people thought Luton were going to be the ones competing for Derby's record for the least amount of points in a Premier League season. It might be beaten by all three of them. I had Burnley quite high up. Luton, I had the lowest, and Sheffield United, I had kind of in between them both. All three of them have started the season like shit. Can you blame them? Probably not. But does this speak about the quality of the Championship or the stupidly different quality of the Premier League that has been made by all the money that's been brought into the league and has just created a stupid disparity between the best and the second best, similarly to how Manchester City, the disparity between them and second best more often than not is stupid. It works on a micro level like that and a macro level when you look at the Premier League and the Championship. So I guess it's one of those things where congratulations Newcastle, you guys were awesome, really good performance, but also what are we doing here type thing. What are we doing here? But yeah, there's just that. There's that. I don't really know where to go from there. If we're going to move on again and speak on Ajax as we wrap things up. Ajax went 3-0 down to... Who did they go 3-0 down to? Let's look. I literally saw it. I was looking at it this morning when it happened. Feyenoord. That's it. Ajax went 3-0 down to Feyenoord over the weekend, and the game was postponed because of crowd trouble. I then went to search what happened in that game and then what happened with said crowd trouble. It was full-blown riots, full-blown storming the pitch, flares, vandalising the stadium, full-blown riots. The state of Ajax right now is fucked. The squad is unrecognisable. Them in the Eredivisie is unrecognisable. They're battling relegation as things stand. And I think this is a warning sign to a lot of other teams across Europe and across the world that, yeah, it might all be going well and it might be going swimmingly. You might be making a Champions League semi-final. You might be 30 seconds away from making a Champions League final with the best squad you've had in over 2-3 decades, playing beautiful football, selling people on for 50, 60, 70 million. But within 4 or 5 years, it can just evaporate and bang, you're back down to rock bottom. It's a big kind of, oh shit, nothing is guaranteed in football. And it's disheartening to see because Ajax are a massive club with a huge history. So seeing where they are now, considering where they were 5 years ago, is a big kind of, oh shit. Look at the scenes when they beat Real Madrid in that Champions League quarter final, and you had thousands of Ajax supporters going mental, to now where you have thousands of Ajax supporters vandalising the pitch and vandalising the stadium. It's a wow type thing. So it's really sad. It is sad. It's sad. It definitely is sad. So there you go. But yeah, those all I think for today's episode. No real run sheet. We just kind of riffed. We just kind of shot the shit. Shoot the shit is the word, but the past tense of that is shot the shit. What am I talking about? So yes, thank you very much for watching another episode of the 2 Foot Attack podcast. I enjoyed this episode. This was good. Got to speak about my club and got to rant for half an hour, which is awesome. Love doing that. Make sure to subscribe to the 2 Foot Attack podcast. Like I said, do all the things I said at the start of the video. That would mean the world. Any parting words? Stay well, stay safe. Make sure you, if you live in Australia, if you live in Melbourne, get a tan because it's going to be hot over the next week. We're heading into spring, so take your Zyrtex, go outside, get a tan, get some colour. And yeah, anything else to say? Should probably do a preview of the week. Is it Champions League football? I think there might be. Champions League. Is there? There is not. There's midweek Premier League though. Fat chance on watching that. Oh, Copa Libertadores semi-final. Boca. A River in it? Oh, River aren't in it. No, that's a shame. Oh well. Anyways, Boca and Palmeiras versus Fluminense and Internacional. Anyways, I'm digressing as per. But yeah, if you live in Melbourne or if you live in Australia, go outside, get a tan. It's nice weather. Heading into summer. Stay well, stay safe. Hope all your teams win midweek and over the weekend. And yeah, see you guys next week. Stay well, stay safe. Goodbye.